I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's EGGBURT, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
John now feels remorse. John now feels bad because...
You want to clue him into what we discussed over the break, Brad?
In our last segment, we were talking about the fact that I mentioned Japanese ball players and the Caribbean area ball players who are now sort of ruling baseball. Well, not necessarily ruling, but there's quite a few of them in there. And you mentioned Ohtani. What's his first name?
Mr.
Ohtani.
He's Ohtani's son.
And you said that there was another famous person, Tawny Kitaen, which, and now the sad part of it is, you and I looked this up off air, and we both hit the Wikipedia page about the same thing. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She died 3 years ago.
I saw that. I couldn't believe that. Yeah, because I was going to make a reference as to, perhaps, well, anyway. But yeah, she is no longer with us, Brad. And she was super young. She would have been 50 when she died, right?
No, she was 59. She was born in
59. Okay.
She was born in 61. Born in San Diego. She died May 7th, 2021, Newport Beach. And if you don't know who Tawny Kitaen is, probably the most famous reference to Tawny Kitaen is, and she married the guy, David Coverdale, who was the lead singer for the group Whitesnake. And they did this video where, was it Here You Come Again? Is that Here
I go again.
Right. And Tawny Kitaen is dancing on the hoods. I think
yes.
there are two, aren't there two Jaguars that are side by side?
Yeah,
and
I think so.
And she's dancing back and forth on the hoods of, and let's say at the time, Tawny Kitaen, her body on a scale of 1, excuse me, see I get choked up when I talk about it. Her body on a scale of 1 to 10, she was probably 11.5. You know what I mean?
I'd say that. Yeah, I think that's fair.
She was just absolutely positively gorgeous, and it got to be like that was in the days of when MTV actually was MTV, when they did music videos. That music video was what they called in super power rotation, where it came up about every half an hour on MTV.
Oh, yeah.
They
it was
just
fantastic.
Played the daylights
and
out
I think,
of that.
let's get nostalgic for a minute, Brad. Not only did MTV used to play music videos, but women in the 80s looked that way. And one of my favorite follows on social media, I follow a guy named Aaron Clarey. You can find him on Instagram at Clarey, Aaron, A-A-R-N. But he will post, Brad, I'd say weekly, He'll post like a nostalgia picture from the 80s, like, an airline, Brad. We've talked about airline stewardesses, or he'll post a beach photo or an old Spuds McKenzie ad, something like that. And he'll say, "I'm sorry you missed the 80s. Enjoy your tattooed women with blue hair."
Well, you want to hear a weird story?
I do.
I have a friend of mine. I don't know if she can still consider to be a friend, because there's a whole situation behind that. But let's leave that as is. Okay. And she was involved in the legal system. And at one point in time, she got to be a very high-level person in the legal system. And she would tell me about going on these various, because they had to have, you're familiar with what they call CLE, continuing law education.
Oh, yeah.
The attorneys, and there's
like
a lot.
CLEs, yeah.
Right. There's a lot of different professions that have to have continuing education, nursing, and things like that. Anyway, she would go to these various seminars for CLE, and the one that got very popular was some very, very prominent pathologist who was the guy who was doing all these autopsies. And, he was the guy they would call in. You've heard these things where the family is called in famed pathologist, blah, 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 when they would do an autopsy. So he would do a presentation on the various things that the attorneys, and this was primarily aimed at defense attorneys and various things defense attorneys should be looking for with pathology reports, with murder cases and things like that. And then the fun part, when he was done giving his dissertation, the thing that everybody stayed for was he would show his pictures of the tattoos on the dead people. He would specifically take, obviously no facial shots, but he would take the bizarre, weird, strange tattoos, and the one that always brought the house down was some dude who had his name tattooed on the bottom of his foot as his toe tag. And
nice. So he knew what was coming.
The tattoo, the picture was of the tattooed toe tag with his name on it on the bottom of his foot, and the actual toe tag on another toe of his foot next to each other with the same name on it. And that was the one that everybody was like, yeah, show us the toe tag shot, because he was like famous for this. So how bizarre is that? Okay, couple things to talk about. Yesterday, something came across my view, which I'd never heard this before, and I want to see if you know this story or not too. Do you know the story of Marjorie Finlay? Do you know who Marjorie Finlay is?
No, I don't.
Okay, here, let me see if I can get the link to work. I saw this yesterday. I thought to myself, I never knew this before. Marjorie Finlay is Taylor Swift's grandmother.
Okay.
Now, here's the interesting thing with Marjorie Finlay. Guess where she was born and guess where she grew up?
I'm going to guess it's somewhere local.
St. Charles.
No way.
Yes.
So is it? Did you say maternal or paternal grandma?
I believe this is her maternal grandmother.
Okay.
Her real name is Marjorie Moehlenkamp. That was her married name. She grew up in St. Charles, Missouri. Talks about she began her singing career while she was in high school. She went to attend Lindenwood College, now Lindenwood University, to pursue a Bachelor of Music and Voice from 1945 to 1949. In her time, she belonged to Mu Phi Epsilon, professional music fraternity, and was a soloist with the Lindenwood Choir. And it goes on to talk about she won in 1950, she won a soprano talent contest that gave her a spot on the network radio show Music with the Girls that toured the USA for a year. Now, what's interesting is there's actually a picture of her being awarded this at the time. And matter of fact, it's interesting. Here, I'll read you this. This is the caption of the picture. It shows Marjorie on stage with the guy who's giving her a kiss on the cheek. Oh my God, we couldn't do that anymore.
You couldn't do that today, for
and
sure.
here's what the caption of the picture says. Miss Marjorie Moehlenkamp, 21-year-old singer, receives a congratulatory kiss from Hal Fredericks of KXOK.
KXOK,
right.
An iconic radio station.
At the time, owned by the Star Times newspaper, as she announced yesterday as the winner of a talent contest held in connection with the St. Louis appearance of the American Broadcasting Company network program, Music with the Girls. It talks about she got married in Palm Beach, Florida on March 22nd, 1952, and they wanted to have two daughters, Allison born in 1957 and Andrea born only a year later in 1958. So I assume that's one of those is Taylor Swift's mother, correct?
Yeah, and Taylor Swift's middle name, I know this from my daughters, is Allison.
Right. Okay, and get this. Due to Roberts, this is her husband, Robert. Due to Roberts' work in heavy construction, their family lived in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and several other Central American countries. At each stop, Marjorie sang with symphony orchestras, performed opera, and starred in musical productions. Marjorie made her television debut in 1960 when she became mistress of ceremonies and singer on a bilingual variety program called The Pan American Show. And this is her quote. She says, "I certainly qualified. My Spanish was bad enough to be funny, and the audience loved it." Finlay shared in a St. Louis Globe-Democrat article in January 1962, second reference to a newspaper which no longer around.
Yeah.
At the time, she was about to make her St. Louis debut as a singer at a pop concert being held by the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra at the Kiel Auditorium. Good old. Maybe we need to call Ed Golterman and see if he knows.
We should. Yeah. Now that was it was the same big building, but that was technically a different venue than the Opera House.
Yes, the auditorium is where the Enterprise Center is now. The auditorium was torn down. They saved the Opera House, which is on the north side of the block, and
which is now Stiefel.
Right, Stiefel. It was Peabody for a while. Among Finlay's other accomplishments was receiving an alumni certificate of merit from Lindenwood College in October of 1961. While living in Puerto Rico, she was also given the honor of being named an honorary captain in the Puerto Rican Air National Guard.
Oh, what an honor!
This is Taylor Swift's grandmother. I had no idea. And you know what? You would think with all the popularity that Taylor Swift has right now, you would think that in St. Louis people go, "Oh my God, she was born and raised in St. Charles and she went to Lindenwood." I've never heard that before. Have you ever heard that before?
I hadn't heard that at all either. And so that's even more reason why Taylor Swift should play the Family Arena. Now, she skipped St. Louis, of course, because she only played during the Eras Tour. She only played NFL stadiums. So she skipped St. Louis. And if you were in St. Louis, you either had to fly somewhere or go to Kansas City, which,
John,
who wants to do that? But yeah, Brad. So do you think there's a chance she'll play the Family Arena?
I don't think so.
I heard that she was going to do the Columns. She was going to do a reception at the Columns.
The Columns is long since gone, John. Do you know that?
No, it's right next to Pio's, right? Isn't it? Aren't they going to do a thing down at Pio's?
No. The Columns was a banquet center right there on 70 between 5th Street and 94, and they tore it down. It's now an SSM medical building.
No, they turned that into Noah's Ark, right?
No, that's
the new Noah's Ark location. Okay, that's right. I got it.
No, that's on the other side. Noah's Ark is on the east side of 5th Street. The Columns was on the west side of 5th Street.
You're right. Columns is now, they took the Mr. Steak building and they made that the Columns. You're right, Brad. Thank you.
The Mr. Steak building was just recently torn down as well, too.
I'm doing the best I can to derail you, Brad.
And I knew Mr. Steak. I used to eat there all the time.
No, was he related to Mr. Food from Channel 5?
He's an interesting guy because he's a very successful real estate guy who talked about the fact that, it was actually sort of a fascinating story, that when he was in high school, he got a job working at some restaurant in St. Charles and loved to cook. And to the point where then he went off into business and became a very successful real estate agent. And he bought the Mr. Steak restaurant when I would go there sometimes during lunch, I always ate lunch there quite a few times, probably ate there a couple dozen times for lunch. And he would actually come out to the tables. And here's the guy who owns the place. Here's the guy who's the, at the time he was for lunchtime, he was like the head chef. And he would come out and talk to every table. I can't remember his name. It was like Schneider or something like that. I see him every once in a while on my Facebook feed. I'll have to find out.
Is he still alive?
Oh, yeah.
You're kidding me. Doesn't he have to be like your age?
No. Yeah, he's like 80.
Good God, Brad. Now, is he ambulatory? Like, is he up and around or is he a little gimpy too?
John's referring to the fact that I had to meet with an attorney on Monday, and the attorney said to me, "How come you're limping?"
And you put them in their place, and you said that because of your little Debbie and soda habit, you acquired adult onset diabetes, and you're the first white man to get it in a long time, and you got a replacement leg, and then you lectured them and you made them feel bad, which is the point of being a handicap, right?
John, I do not have diabetes. One of the things that has happened to me is that, as you grow up, maybe you have this as well too, there are certain things that your parents did that you vowed that you're going to do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my father died of complications of type 2 diabetes, which was a very sad situation because my father did not necessarily take very good care of himself. And one of the things that I have done as a person who is bound to determine to never have that problem, every time I have blood work, the first thing I ask my doctor is, "How's my A1C?" And most of the time the doctor would say, "Excellent." Matter of fact, the last time I had it checked, the doctor actually said I couldn't be any further away from being type 2 diabetic. So even though I do eat crazy stuff, and matter of fact, as I'm talking to you on the air here, I have my little bag of M&Ms that I'm eating this morning and my bottle of Mountain Dew, which is if you're an anti-sugar person, then you're not the person for me. Okay.
Now, real quick, Brad, if you're listening to this and you someday would like to be a co-host of an icon of like a Brad Hildebrand and you want to play the John Combest role, remember at some point always make a joke about the disease that killed your co-host's dad. That's always a great thing to do.
Well, but see, the sad thing about that is that if you know anything about the disease of especially type 2 of diabetes, it just keeps growing and growing and growing because people are not taking care of themselves. Now, I'll be the first to admit that, that I've had an issue with weight. I've told the story before. When I graduated from high school, I weighed 162. 2 years later, I weighed 310. It's almost doubled in size. And then I saw the light, and I have fought my weight issue for years and years and years and years and years, but I have kept myself in relatively decent shape as far as my weight is concerned. My age, I run into people that are sometimes younger than me, and I'm not doing great, but I'm doing a hell of a lot better than a lot of other people my age. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and what's going to improve this, Brad, is, and sarcasm aside, these weight loss drugs that were originally invented to be anti-diabetes drugs that are now becoming almost recreational in use, and doctors are prescribing them, they work. And regardless of, they get a lot of pushback because a lot of people who might have lost weight naturally, or a lot of people who just choose to be a little chunky, are mad about these weight loss drugs. But they work, and they're helping people live better lives and more healthy lives. And what we're going to see, Brad, we've talked about this once or twice on the show, is we're going to see increased pressure for taxpayers to fund these weight loss drugs. And it's hard to make an argument. If you're subsidizing a lot of other medicine, it's hard to make an argument of why Medicare shouldn't pay for weight loss drugs if those drugs lead to better health outcomes.
That's John Combest, a spokesperson for the pharmaceutical industry.
That's right. I'm such a friend and fan of big pharma. But it's
right.
True, Brad. I mean, these drugs are really helping people. Do I want to pay the tab for it? Absolutely not. But if you can help people go from being morbidly obese to just a chunker, and it improves their health outcomes, why wouldn't you get on Ozempic or Wegovy?
You know what? Once again, I'm not going to disagree with you. The crazy thing about it is the sad part of it is that, and I'm going to say this and people are going to get mad. If you do, and maybe I can say this because been there, done that. If you have a weight issue, if you really, really, really want to take care of that, you can with no drugs, with just willpower and motivation and going to the gym and not stuffing yourself all the time. God, you
Brad, it's time for your M&M break, Brad. I think we're a minute over your M&M break.
John, you go back and look at pictures of people in the 50s. Matter of fact, every once in a while, and to give you an idea of how exciting life I live, every once in a while I will go back and I'll pull up videos of the Lawrence Welk show from circa early 60s. You don't see any overweight people at all. They have the thing where if you know the Lawrence Welk show, they have a couple scenes where they have a dance floor. They have a live audience, and they have a dance floor, and people get out and dance to the Lawrence Welk music. And nobody is overweight. The women and the men are all skinny. They're all dressed up. The men are all have suits and ties on. The women are all dressed to impress, and nobody is overweight. Same thing if you go back and look at old pictures of baseball, like the Cardinals at Busch Stadium number 1 in the 50s. The men are all in suits and ties with a hat on, and the women all look like they're going to a wedding or something like that, and nobody's overweight. They're all slim and trim. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but weren't we properly shaming fat people to just stay at home? And now we got to walk. If we're trying to walk through the line at Walmart, or we've covered this before, Brad. Maybe there was just so much shaming in that era where we said, hey, if you're fat, we don't want you on the Lawrence Welk show. Maybe they had a separate one. Maybe you could go to a discount version of Lawrence Welk that was only on public access. Maybe you could listen to the show on KXOK.
That was the Kate Smith show.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?